A man was convicted of brutally murdering his wife. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. The prosecutor called it an open and shut case. He was confident. The town was confident. The judge was confident. Michael Morton spent the next 25 years in a Texas prison. The prosecutor had a document, a report from the victim's own son, that proved Michael wasn't home when his wife was killed. He never showed it to the defense. He never showed it to the jury. This is what happens when the justice system is confidently wrong, and someone makes sure it stays that way. August 13th, 1986. Christine Morton was found beaten to death in the bedroom of her home in Williamson County, Texas. She was 31 years old. Her 3-year-old son Eric was asleep in the house. He was unharmed. Her husband, Michael Morton, had already left for work. It was his birthday. The night before, Christine had been tired, and they had argued. She'd left him a note that night expressing frustration, but also her love. Police found that note. They focused on it immediately. Within days, Michael Morton was their only suspect. He fit a simple narrative: troubled marriage, absent husband, victim wife. The investigation didn't look much further. The prosecution's case in 1987 was built on 3 pillars. First, Michael Morton had no alibi witnesses at his workplace who could account for every minute of his morning. Second, a bloody bandana was found in the woods behind the house. It would later become critical evidence, but at trial, the prosecution simply noted it existed without pursuing what it might mean. Third, and most damning to the jury, was the note Christine had left. Prosecutors framed it as evidence of a troubled, resentful husband, a man with motive. What the jury never heard was a statement from a neighbor who had reported seeing a green van parked repeatedly near the Morton home in the days before Christine's murder. A man was seen walking toward the house, and they never heard what 3-year-old Eric told his grandmother shortly after his mother's death. He said, "Daddy wasn't there. A monster came in and hurt Mommy while Daddy was gone." That statement existed in official police files. The prosecutor, Ken Anderson, had it. He did not disclose it to the defense. Michael Morton was convicted of first-degree murder, sentenced to life in prison. For the first several years, Michael Morton did what most wrongfully convicted people eventually do. He tried to accept it. He had no choice. His son Eric was put up for adoption. They lost contact entirely. Michael would later say that losing his son hurt more than losing his freedom. He maintained his innocence. He filed appeals. They failed. The courts trusted the system that had put him there. In the meantime, something was happening outside prison walls that no one connected. Yet, in 1988, just 2 years after Christine Morton's murder, a woman named Deborah Masters Baker was found beaten to death in her home near Austin. Same method, similar victim profile. Her case went unsolved. The 2 cases would eventually be linked, but not for another 20 years. In 2005, the Innocence Project took on Michael Morton's case. Their goal was simple: test the physical evidence still in storage from 1986. Specifically, that bloody bandana found in the woods behind the house. It took years of legal battles just to get permission to test it. The prosecution fought the request in court. Delays stacked on delays. It wasn't until 2011 that DNA results came back. The bandana contained Christine Morton's blood. It also contained DNA from an unknown male. That DNA was run through the national database. It matched a man named Mark Allen Norris, a convicted felon with a history of violent crime who had lived in the area at the time of the murder. Norris was also linked to the 1988 murder of Deborah Masters Baker. Same DNA, 2 women, 2 decades apart, 1 man. Michael Morton was exonerated on October 4th, 2011. He had served 25 years. He walked out of prison and was eventually reunited with his son Eric, now an adult, who had spent his entire childhood believing his father was a murderer. Here is where the story gets worse. After Michael Morton was exonerated, investigators began examining what prosecutor Ken Anderson had actually known back in 1987. They found the police report containing little Eric's statement. They found documentation of the neighbor's report about the green van. They found records proving Anderson had possessed all of this material before trial. He had never disclosed any of it. He was legally required to under Brady v. Maryland, a 1963 Supreme Court ruling that mandates prosecutors share all exculpatory evidence with the defense. Ken Anderson was not just a prosecutor in 1987. By the time Michael Morton was freed, he had become a Texas District Court judge. In 2013, Anderson was charged with criminal contempt for intentionally concealing evidence. It was one of the first times in American legal history that a prosecutor faced actual criminal consequences for withholding evidence that led to a wrongful conviction. He pled no contest. He lost his law license. He served 5 days in jail. 5 days. Michael Morton served 25 years. Mark Allen Norris, the actual killer, died in a California prison in 2014 while awaiting trial for Christine's murder. He never stood trial. He was never convicted for what he did. No one was ever truly held accountable. The system that failed Michael Morton mostly just moved on. Michael Morton has spoken publicly about his experience many times. He doesn't describe himself as bitter, though no one would blame him if he was. He describes himself as changed. In 2013, he testified before the Texas legislature in support of what became the Michael Morton Act, a law requiring prosecutors in Texas to disclose all evidence to the defense. It passed. 25 years. A wife who never got justice, a son who grew up without his father, a judge who served 5 days. Everyone in that courtroom in 1987 was absolutely certain they had their man. The prosecutor was the most confident of all. He just happened to know something no one else was allowed to know. If this case made you feel something, subscribe. We cover the cases where the system was completely confident